all. Thank you all very much. It's a great privilege for me to be able to host this last panel here, and this is one of those rare opportunities for me to say nothing, and that's what I intend to do once I introduce these people. We have two great Americans here with us today, one of which was not born in America, but he is as patriotic as anyone in this place today. Yeah, and it's not Frank Gaffnet, so. So let me introduce them to you, and then we'll get started. Frank Gaffnet is the founder and president and CEO of the Center for Security Policy, a not-for-profit, nonpartisan educational corporation established in 1988. Under President Ronald Reagan, Frank acted as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. He served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Forces and Arms Control under Assistant Secretary Richard Pearl. He hosts a Secure Freedom radio program daily. It's an hour-long program that reaches a very broad audience, and he is nationally syndicated. It airs every weeknight. His daily Secure Freedom Minute commentaries are heard on over 200 stations coast to coast. Frank Gaffnet. Welcome, Frank Gaffnet, here. Our next guest, and also a very good friend of mine, is Kamal Saleem. And Kamal was born in the what you might say is the belly of the beast. He was born to a large Sunni Muslim family, right in the heart of the Middle East, and raised as a Muslim. I don't even need to read this thing. He was recruited to the Muslim Brotherhood at 7 years old and committed his first act of terrorism and supported the Muslim Brotherhood operations when he was just over 7 years old as he went into Israel. I strongly suggest that you get his autobiography this afternoon. He'll be signing books, Blood of the Lambs. He converted to Christianity in 1985, and it's an incredible story of how he was hurt in a very bad automobile accident out in the Midwest, and that ultimately brought him to a relationship with Jesus Christ. He runs a ministry today called Qumi Ministries, or Qum Ministries, Arise. It's Arabic for arise, and he travels all over the world. First of all, he has a deep passion for reaching Muslims. But secondly, I've never seen anybody do a gospel presentation that was more passionate and more effective than the gospel presentation that Kamal Saleem gives, and many, many people see their lives changed as a result of his invitation to receive Christ. So, and finally, he and I wrote a book together, so make sure you get that book out there because we do need your money. Okay? And now I'd like to go to Frank Gaffnet and ask Frank to talk to us about the threats in today's world and what we are seeing happen in our world, and then we'll go to Kamal. And thank you, Frank. Thank you, Jim.
Hi, what a great privilege to be here. I'm going to move through with great speed some material that I'd like to share with you about specifically what I consider to be, based on what my old boss Ronald Reagan used to call the existential threat of freedom of our generation. Everyone faces them. These guys have, in their own ways, been trying to, to varying degrees, help us understand the nature of that existential threat. They seem mostly to be talking about these sorts of people. There are many more besides, but these are sort of the bell ringers in the violent jihadist space. I want to talk mostly about this outfit that Kamal used to be associated with, the Muslim Brotherhood, which I believe is extraordinarily dangerous, as I'll share with you in a moment. You don't need to look a whole lot further than their creed to see why that is. What all of these guys have, the violent guys, the so-called pre-violent or non-violent guys of the Muslim Brotherhood, have in common is Sharia. If I leave nothing with you but this is really the most important takeaway. Sharia is, I feel, predominant, and I apologize, the spacing on these are for Macs, not for IBMs, and that's what we've got in the back, so just bear with me. There's a patina of religiosity to it, to be sure, but fundamentally it is about political, military, and legal doctrines that govern the lives of all Muslims, the faithful ones at the very least. Why is that a problem? Well, while there are some Muslims that don't want to live under Sharia, don't want to impose it on the rest of us, unfortunately, there are many, many millions who do. Indeed, they understand that this ideology, and that's really what it is the true faith of Islam. That's what the authorities of Islam say as well. But if we understand that that's what it is, we actually have laws that allow us to protect ourselves against it. If we do not understand that, however, if we allow the adherents to Sharia to insist that this is just their faith, this is just another religion that has to be protected like ours, the other faiths in our country are under our Constitution, we're toast. So that's particularly true because what Sharia requires of all Muslims, all faithful Muslims, is that they must engage in jihad. And that is not, by the way, personal struggle. That has several very prominent features to it. The one that we're most familiar with, of course, since 9/11 is this one. The violent kind of jihad, the kind of jihad that 7-year-olds and lots of other Muslims are called to engage in. It's performed by groups, but it's also performed by individuals where they can't get a group together to do it. And it is devastatingly effective and terrifying, and thereby encouraging submission. This is another form of jihad. It's been called refuge jihad, or a kind of demographic jihad. You can have millions of Muslims coming from what they call the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, to where you live, the House of War, Dar al-Harb. Or you can simply have those who are already in the Dar al-Harb populate at higher rates than the non-Muslim population. This is often overlooked. The President of the United States went to Cairo, Egypt, to promise that he was going to facilitate something called zakat. I think most people didn't know what he was talking about. A colleague of ours, Andy McCarthy, couldn't figure out what he was talking about, not because he didn't understand what zakat was, but he couldn't figure out what were the impediments to it in our country. And the truth of the matter is, the only impediment you could come up with is prohibitions on material support for terrorism. And in fact, 1 out of the 8, or depending on who's counting, as many as 4 of the 8 prescribed purposes towards which this really obligatory tax on Muslims can be applied involves jihad. And then there's this, and this is really what I want to focus on for the remainder of my talk. The Muslim Brotherhood has talked about a civilization jihad. As I say, it's not that they don't reject violence, it's just that they believe you shouldn't use it where you're not powerful enough to pull it off. Where you aren't powerful enough to pull it off, you must engage in something else, perhaps of the other kinds, but also this, a stealthy, seditious, subversive form of jihad. Turns out we have seen this happening in Egypt for many, many years. With the overthrow of the Egyptian Morsi government, a Muslim Brotherhood government, they pretty much moved into the revolutionary phase, showing that there's no hesitancy to using violence when they need to. Here in the United States, you have this chap, Niyad Awad, arguably the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. He runs a group that was founded by Hamas, called the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and is very prominent in these circles. I want to just share with you what we've learned about the Muslim Brotherhood in America through this handy little book. I consider it one of the most important in the field, not because I wrote it or any of my friends did, but because the Muslim Brotherhood wrote it. The Muslim Brotherhood essentially in America providing a report back to the mothership in Egypt about what they were doing. This is dated 1991, folks, so it was about 25 years after they began operations here, about 26 years ago. And this is what they told the leadership was their mission in North America: destroying Western civilization from within by their hands, meaning yours, and the hands of the believers, so that Allah's religion was made victorious over all other religions. It's kind of a tip-off to the fact that these guys actually aren't friendly, aren't helpful. You heard General Boykin earlier in the program talking with a couple of our favorite people about this particular front in the Muslim Brotherhood's efforts to take us down. What we've come to call the red-green axis, the red of the left, notably the Southern Poverty Law Center, but actually others as well, the green of the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, but also others as well. Their object, make no mistake about it, is to silence not just people like us, but people like you. Because if we're silenced, you won't know about the stealthy jihad. You won't resist it until it's too late. Donald Trump came to office with a plan for victory over jihad. We don't have time to go into this in great detail, but suffice it to say, he brought a clarity about the problem. He actually used the term Sharia to define an ideology that had to be countered. He talked about both the nature of this jihadist threat, the people who don't share our values, who mustn't be brought into this country any longer, and he talked about the networks that are radicalizing in our communities. That's the Muslim Brotherhood, folks. Just lastly, how can you help? Start by being clear about the nature of the problem that we're facing. All of these different forms of jihad need to be understood and need to be counteracted. We need to support the president. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, I believe he's surrounded by people who aren't in this regard. I understand Steve Bannon said this morning that maybe next week he's going to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. I'll take money on that. I hope he will. I hope he will. But he hasn't so far, not because he doesn't think it's necessary, but I think because the people around him have said, oh, you can't do that, Mr. President. We need to insist that he do, and you're incredibly helpful in that regard. I appreciate the chance to talk with you and look forward to the questions. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I want to draw your attention today to the current situation that is taking place in the Middle East, and it's going to affect the United States and affect the EU in whole. And I want to talk about Turkey and what's happening in Turkey today. This is a world new dominance, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and how he is re-coordinating the efforts of Islamism, and he is converting everything back from what it is today, and there's a clash of civilization right now between Islam, the Muslim group, and so therefore I believe this is a great entrance for the United States of America to make policy to hold Iran and Turkey from advancing, and Iraq and all their remnant of, their goals and what so have you. So today I want to take you with me to the PowerPoint. I want to show you something. This is from the Quran. This is from the Quran, Surah 14 and 24. And the Quran says, أَلَمْ تَرَى كَيْفَ فَعَلَ ضَرْبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا كَالْكِتْمَانِ طَيِّبَ بَطًا and كَالشَّجَرَةِ طَيِّبَ أَصْلُهَا ثَابِتٌ وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. The Muslims in the Middle East, they look at this as, this is very important to them, as the President Tayyip, his name is mentioned twice in the Quran. So they look at him as the awaited one. since his name is mentioned in the Quran, and they see this right now, so they are rallying to bring about President Tayyip from Israel, where Hamas is calling for Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, to rise all the way to throughout the east of Europe, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, all those areas calling for the rise of Turkey. And so now we see the president of Turkey has risen the Ottoman Empire altar all over again. And he has declared the Ottoman Empire establishment all over from the beginning. Now we are seeing the move of the star and the crescent. This is the falling star, and this is the crescent that is mentioned in Isaiah 14, 13 through 17, for those who read the Bible. Erdogan just recently blackmailed Europe. And Europe, Germany made a deal with him, and the deal was specifically, now they're giving him $3 billion in financial aid, and they're going to allow 78 million Turkish to enter the EU from end to end without a visa. So this is opening the immigration level into Europe like never before, and the Europeans do not know what they have signed. This is all of it now is forward tracking and changing everything. By the way, look at the signature by the EUs. These are signed signature to allow them to come about. In a recent OIC meeting, the summit that took place in Turkey, which is in Istanbul, this is a very important summit. That is the 13th. And what happened, Erdogan spoke, Tayyip, he spoke about the new armies of Shia and Sunnis. Why would the Shia and Sunni unite together? Why they are the enemy of each other? This is very important. If you have to pay attention to this. Saudi Arabia is a Wahhabi. Erdogan is Salafite, Sufi. The Muslim Brotherhood are Sufi. Al-Qaeda is Wahhabi. So what happened, the uniqueness in all this too, is, I will talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. What happened is the Sufis can and will unite. The Shia and the Sunni, they believe in the united power of the two, while the Wahhabi do not believe in this. Now, he demanded for the seats on the UN, for all the Muslim nation, the OIC. The OIC is Islamic organization, Islamic conference, and that is where the Muslim 57 nations sits on in the United Nations, trying to control the United Nations. Now they're asking for a seat on the UN Council. Then the second one is he's declaring a war as an Islamophobic war against the West, and he's calling for hate crime. This is you. This is you. And what Frank talked about, if we don't fight this agenda, the Muslim Brotherhood, they are not going to be taken down. Because today we are not fighting airplanes, we are fighting people with suits. And we are fighting an ideology. These people, their ideology, 86% of the Islamic ideology, which is Sharia, it is political. And the war they are fighting in the United States of America is political. The other part is they are declaring war on the Christians and Jews. This is what he talked in the OIC. The enemy is in front of us, that's what Muhammad says. They are the Christian and Jews, and he's declaring war on the West. The other thing, he is declaring war on the Christian minorities. He is declaring war on the Christian minorities that they are there in Turkey. And what happened is, we'll talk about this, and then the Kurds. He's calling for holy war against the Kurds. This man is looking forward to sabotage the Kurds so the ground will be open before him from Iraq, Iran and Iraq, all the way through Syria, all the way to Lebanon and the Golan Heights, and to go to Israel immediately. This is Psalms, the book of Psalms coming about, Psalms 83. That's before Ezekiel 38. And so therefore we see all this. He did that with Armenia. His people did that with Armenia, where they killed over 1 million persons. They destroyed them by the sword. They took their inheritance and everything else. He's declaring also, he declared in that the OIC, he said, let us look at this, the Palestinian versus the Israeli. Let's replace the Palestinian organization and and we declare, he declared that Israel should shrink and just step away. And then he spoke about Islamic policy in the UN and why the West should be, decreasing while the Islamic ideology should be part of the UN and leading in the UN. And he talked also about that the Westerners, they come to invade the Middle East to control the gas and the oil. And this is exactly what he wants to control. Because if he controls the gas and oil, he can control the Western civilization. He's projecting what he's going to do. The other thing, he's calling on banning Israel products, which is suffocating Israel to destroy Israel ultimately. And he called also for Islamic justice, because the Islamic justice is not a Western justice. And when the Muslims talk about justice, when they say we believe in justice, their justice and ours are totally two different things. And he's calling about the destruction of Jerusalem and now to be brought to Islamism, to bring about Islamic State. A little bit about the Christian persecution in here. Just recently, he confiscated and he took over this small minority. They are small Christian groups. There are about 25,000 of them over there. There used to be about 50,000. And now what happened? He's taken over their properties, their homes, everything they own, their churches. They're the Syriac Orthodox. He confiscated everything, and now they are running for their life because they know he's going to kill them after that. So what happened is now they have no homes, no churches, nothing. And what is he doing? They went to Europe, but he wants to go after them in Europe. In Islamic leadership, under Erdogan, the Muslim Brotherhood now, the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood has moved all the way from Egypt to Turkey. Why? Because Turkey is calling for the tri-power. What is the tri-power? Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. That's the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And where is that mentioned? Our previous administration, they refer to it as the Levant. This is very important. He want to reestablish the Levant, which is take over the Middle East and establish Turkey, Ottoman Empire proper. And then he want to take that further. Now that the chief general, the Iranian army general have moved, wanted to Turkey, and he met with Erdogan, and now they are uniting the two armies together. The Sufi believes, if the Sufi believe that the Iranian and the Turkish, which is Sunni and Shia, be united together, what happened? That will have to destroy Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, Oman, all will have to be destroyed because they're Wahhabi. Why? Because the leadership of the Sunni is under them today. And by making this, what happened? The house of Hijaz, where Muhammad was born, will have to be destroyed and will have to move to the bloodline of whom? Al-Fatimiyin. Who are these people? That they are the bloodline of Muhammad, which is Iran proper. So by doing so, he is calling in OIC for new leadership, and he's asking for himself to be seated to lead into this. And the Iranians are coming with this. And the new army will be the Revolutionary Army, which is our president declare that they are a terrorist organization. And Iran declared if he will do this, they will have to hit America. And then we're going to see Hezbollah and Bashar army, Bashar Assad army coming together. And then we see under the Turkish, we're going to see the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and the PLO rising together. All this is coming together to pain the Western civilization. And with this, I'm going to stop, but this is the reference. If anybody want to hear about what I spoke on, you can verify it right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kamal and Frank. And now I'm gonna ask you some questions, and I'll ask you to remain there where you're seated and answer these questions. And let me start with you, Frank. One of the things that you didn't really talk about is, under the Trump administration, do we still have people that are associated with the Muslim Brotherhood inside our government?
Jerry, I think it's an incredibly important question, and as I say, this is what they've declared is their objective. We saw considerable numbers of folks who were either actually tied into the Muslim Brotherhood, usually through front organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, with the Obama administration. And one of the course corrections that I think wound up making Donald Trump president of the United States is he said, we're not going to be doing that sort of thing, right? Unfortunately, I think there are still people who have those kinds of ties, as well as people who are simply sympathetic to them, who share that agenda of raising up the Muslim Brotherhood, something that, by the way, Barack Obama explicitly endorsed on the eve of the so-called Arab Spring with something called Presidential Study Directive 11, still classified, but clearly a charter for the U.S. to help the Muslim Brotherhood take power. Let me just give you one example of how it's working in the Trump administration. You may find this shocking. Honestly, I do. The man working under a very problematic national security advisor by the name of H.R. McMaster on counterterrorism at the National Security Council is named Mustafa Javed Ali. Now, a telltale as to whether that's a problem or not was he was told that the National Security Council needed to get a briefing from Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Many of you may know her, an extraordinary woman out of Somalia, now essentially under 24-hour protection because of what she said in opposition to Sharia. Mustafa Javed Ali refused to allow her to brief the National Security Council unless she were accompanied by a representative of the Council on American Islamic Relations to counteract her testimony. A clue.
Thank you, Frank. Kamal, let me go to you. Something that I think we're all a little interested in as we reflect back to last summer, and there was a coup in Turkey. Was that a legitimate coup, or do you have any information that might indicate that Erdogan staged that coup?
You're absolutely right. The coup is staged. The whole coup, Erdogan did not get up there by his own power. There is a gentleman by name, his Fethullah, or Fethullah as the Turkish will call him, and his second name is Gulen. Fethullah Gulen, he is a multi-billionaire businessman. And his power, he has at least about 18 to 23 million followers in Turkey. And so therefore, his infiltration to the Turkish government was very unique. The way he moved into the whole civilization, he moved through the rank of political rank, through the Senate, through all this, through the professorship, and also he moved into the general system and the police. So he controlled the entire Turkish government by his influence, and so therefore in his system worked like a terrorist program. And how does it work? He has couple imam under him, and each imam has a sector under him, and each imam will speak to different group of imams, and these imams will release it, each group will release it to the other one, so it goes up and down with this. So Erdogan was helped by Fethullah, Gulen, and he wanted the power for himself, because Fethullah Gulen was called the awaited one, he was called the Mahdi, and they were waiting for this, but he knew that he won that title, and the only way to take this title is to take his nation back. So he stepped outside of Turkey, and he set this coup in place to destroy Fethullah and his generals. As they stepped outside, the professors, the generals, the police, the doctors, all these people, they were arrested, and many of them were slaughtered, and we don't know about this. This is how it happened, and then he took his nation. Now he owns the title.
Thank you, and just let me add one commentary here. I was talking to a Turk who sees exactly what's going on in Turkey. He's now living in the United States, but he said, go back and look at the previous coups in Turkey, and there have been a number of them. And he said, what time did they start? Well, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, what time did this coup start? It was about 8 o'clock at night when people were still out on the streets, which was a clear indicator that it was not a legitimate coup planned by a professional group like the military there. So thank you, Kamal, for that. Frank, let me go to you. Something that's a big issue for all of the people in this room here today. What are the Muslims doing with regards to the Christian church? And both of you just touched on that, but let's take a couple of minutes here and talk in a little more depth. What's happening to the Christians?
Well, there are Christians in the Middle East, there are Christians in Africa, there are Christians in the Far East and other parts of the world who are increasingly at risk or actually being subjected to genocide. Even John Kerry finally came around to declaring that to be the case. This has been going on for years. Unfortunately, it has been a chronic problem for not only people in those parts of the world, but so many others. And this is something that has been deeply frustrating, I think, to all of us who have been watching it play out, mostly unchecked. And that is that while there are lots of people, in particular here in the United States, and working with others in these various regions, trying to help the people now being, in some cases, raped, crucified, brutalized. Kamal talked about churches being taken over or torched, or simply murdered outright, sold into slavery, you name it. What we've not had to this point is critical mass in terms of standing against this, even calling it out, really. So I just wanted to mention, I don't know if the folks in the back can throw up the last slide that I had, but I wanted to just mention this. You may remember, some of you at least, there was a time when a campaign was mounted to promote the cause of Soviet Jewry by Jewish synagogues and temples across America. And one of its hallmarks was that a campaign was mounted to put outside of those places of worship banners or billboards or what have you saying, "Save Soviet Jewry." And though a lot of people were confused about what was wrong with Soviet jewelry, it turns out that it turned into an opportunity to talk about a problem. People who were being subjected to horrific treatment at the hands of the Soviet Union, and my old boss, Scoop Jackson, helped actually get them released by taking that campaign and turning it into legislative action on most favored nation status for the Soviet Union. We've come up with a suggestion to all of those who are working in this space and all of those who feel that something must be done to try to prevent what's been going on for too long, but to stop it at last, by getting a similar kind of campaign on behalf of the persecuted church. And my friend and colleague Kelly Kohlberg is up here. If you're interested in knowing more about this, how you could get a banner like this that you could have outside your church, or for that matter outside your home, to help raise awareness and to help those who are pulling together to fight this affliction, this scourge. Please see Kelly or me or General Boykin or others of us who are very much concerned about saving the persecuted church. Thank you, Jerry.
Great, thank you, Frank.
May I add to this?
I want to ask you a different question, Kamal. Oh, you want to answer something?
Yes,
Go
the
ahead.
persecuted church is not just overseas in the Muslim world, or it's happening in Europe today, and it's here in the United States of America, and it's done right there in our state capital here. They're coming against to limit the Christians and the Jewish people ability from being. This persecution is coming against the two people, the brothers, the Christian and Jews. And this is an ethnic cleansing that we have not come to understand. And if Sharia is implemented, then the destruction of the Christian in America will start at the count of the first day that Sharia will be established. This is happening in Europe today, and now we're seeing the Christian are running away from Europe. See how many Christians coming to the United States of America, and see how many Jewish people are running to Israel. It's happening all over. It's a wake-up call for America.
Okay, we got a little less than 3 minutes left. I want to ask you a question I think is very important to this audience. Right now, yesterday our president said he was going to decertify the Iranian nuclear deal. There are people still in this country that say, we lived with a nuclear-armed Russia and a nuclear-armed China. Why can't we live with a nuclear-armed Iran? And they don't understand the idea behind the Shia 12er theology, which could compel them to actually use a nuclear weapon. Could you briefly explain what that theology says?
Yes. The 12th Imamate, the theology in Iran for the Shia is the Mahdi when he is introduced. And when we say the Mahdi, many people must understand, is not just the Caliph. He is the image of the Messiah. And when he comes in, he will unite all the Muslim nations together. The hadith by Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, he said in his traditions, he said, the days of Islam will not come about until the Muslim arise. The arising of the Muslim is holy war, because the Muslim could not live their life by peace. Because the only way they can prove their life to go to paradise is to kill and be killed, according to the teaching of the Quran and the hadith and seerah. So therefore, by this rising, and now we see Turkey has made a deal with Russia for long-range missile, short-range missile, and if Iran obtain the nukes, we are in deep trouble, because Saudi Arabia will be sent home before time, and we're going to see the whole thing lit up. And who to say if they can stand outside our seashore as just a business, business ship, and they shoot their range missiles from there to the United States of America. They have said it, and they have said it, they're going to destroy America. It's time to believe them, because it's mandatory to fulfill it.
And let me finish up by saying a Shia 12er believes that this Mahdi or Messiah will not return until the world is in an atmosphere of bloodshed and chaos. Is there any better way to create bloodshed and chaos than for Iran to use a nuclear weapon on Israel, which would then bring back the Messiah? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It has been a privilege being with you, and let's thank our panelists here. Thank you.